I want to welcome everyone to Season 4 of Masterclass Moments with Dr. Joel B. Kemp. I am Dr. Kemp. I'm excited to have you join us for this upcoming season. The season will be a little bit different. We'll get a chance to dive more deeply into the topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is the question of the Bible and race in America. In this election year of 2024, with all of the things swirling around regarding race and religion and the future of the republic, thought it was a good idea to allow this space to be a chance to have those in-depth conversations. So we look forward to that. We'll have several guests who will join us throughout the season to give their insights, their wisdom, and to hopefully enrich all of us as we go about our journey together. Before I bring on a woman who needs no introduction, the host who's been with us from the very beginning, I always want to give you a little Hebrew nugget to sort of frame our time together. Our Hebrew word for today is the word Am. The word Am. Am in Hebrew is the word that most often is translated as people. So when you want to describe a nation or a collection of individuals, you call them an Am, a people. What's lesser known is that that same word, Am, can also mean army or military force. So often when the Bible talks about an Am, they're not just talking about a bunch of people, like gathering at the family barbecue, but they're talking about a military force. That becomes particularly important in African American traditions because of our love of Ezekiel 37 in the Valley of Dry Bones. And in that story where God's Spirit revitalizes a people, it's not literally a people that's being revitalized, rather, it is an army. So in African American traditions, what does it mean to celebrate a God who restores us as a nation, not just as a people, but as an army, as a military force to bring about God's kingdom on earth? So in this Black History Month and in this season of Lent, when we think about God's Spirit reviving us, it revives us not just to the acts of worship, the acts of service, but to be a military force that is the force of power for good in this world and, as the saints would say, in the world to come. So speaking of the world to come, I have a chance to bring back to the stage sort of the hostess with the mostest, that old expression, one of my sisters and beloved friends and family members, the one and only Reverend Dr. Dominique Robinson. How are you, Dominique?
Greetings, Dr. Kemp. Hi, family, Masterclass Moment family. How are you all doing?
I feel like it's been a while.
Yes. I mean, but you've been grinding. You've been grinding, and that's exactly what the people want to know, Dr. Kemp. That's what they want to know. They want to know what, because last time we gathered, we shared. You were on sabbatical doing incredible work, both of self-care, sabbats. We spent time talking about Sabbath looks like it means. Um, and then some academic, intellectual, vocational goals you had set before yourself, you and your wonderful wife together. So the people want to know where you've been. Where have you been, Dr. Joel B. Kemp? And also, people, while you're listening, this is the moment right after his birthday. So I want you to know that he has also been eating raisin bran on a different level while we're celebrating this.
Exactly. No birthday is complete without Raisin Bran, right?
I put
Yeah,
that on your Facebook page, and somebody was like, "Why are you calling him your favorite raisin bran Hebrew scholar?" And I was like, "You clearly not listening to the podcast."
right. But hopefully that person tune in, watch us, follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and listen
That's
to the
right.
back seasons of the podcast to get a little more
I,
context for that.
I told them to get themselves together, but what I appreciate is that they were ready to defend your honor.
Right. I appreciate that. I have to log back on Facebook. I've been off for the past week with birthday life,
No, no,
so I'll
no,
get back
no,
on.
no. It's Lent now. We're staying off of it. We got to stay off of it.
Right. Yeah. So as you mentioned, a lot of this year has been kind of the rest and work. So I was able to get a couple articles out and published and in hands of publishers. So that's an exciting kind of on the
Yes.
professional front. I'm still working on the book that's due at the end of this year, which will be part of what we'll talk about for this upcoming season. Looking
Okay.
at the question of, again, the construction of race using Genesis and how that's been used or misused in American contexts.
Yes.
Then on the kind of personal note, 'cause I just celebrated my birthday a few days ago, but a few months ago, we celebrated my father's 90th birthday.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Longevity in the family. Yes.
exactly.
Right.
So praying I got those genes as well. So if all goes well, I have another 40 years or so in front of me.
40
But
years of eating Raisin Bran, everybody. Doesn't that just seem just overwhelmingly exciting? Like this is
exactly.
it. That
See, what I also have to do is I have to make sure people buy Ezekiel cereal because they actually because they made a cereal roughly based on the recipe he uses in Ezekiel. I think it's chapter 4 about how to bake a certain kind of cake. So they have
yes.
Ezekiel bread, and then they did a cereal version of that.
Oh my.
So got to rep Ezekiel, the prophet I study the most. So he's into cereal
Oh,
games. I have to be into it as well.
everybody. This is the top tier epitome of nerd joking that is happening right now.
Yes.
Biblical nerd joking. Yeah, Ezekiel bread. And I know somebody right now, while you're watching this, you're going to Google
Right.
Ezekiel cereal right now, Ezekiel bread. What you need to know is you're going to have to make an investment, but not like the widow, but you will need to make an investment to
Right.
purchase this cereal and this bread. The bread is a little thick for me. It's a little, like, I can't eat just peanut butter and jelly on that.
No, no, no. You
You know,
need
it needs
more
to,
substance.
right. It needs to be like a turkey club sandwich. I can't
Right.
just,
Exactly.
and then I feel bad because if it's Ezekiel bread, I probably shouldn't be eating turkey and bacon. You know,
Right.
it's all the
Kind of violates
complications.
the rule, right? But you can toast it, maybe do like some hummus or something like that. So you can kind of
Hummus, yeah. Okay, right. So we're hinting at the Lenten fasting that's going on around here too. That's it.
exactly.
Perfect. So you've had some articles. You're working on the book, which probably, as working on book, is also a part of like lecturing and doing some talks around that are building up the, as Dr. Frank Thomas would say, intellectual cachet around the development of the book. Um, have you been what have you been doing for fun on your sabbatical, if there's such a thing?
Yeah, I make a point of having fun, right? Part of that we're talking
Okay.
about Shabbat, that rest. So one of the things I've been doing, one, I enjoy kind of spy movies. So I splurged and decided to go back and reactivate a Netflix account. So I've been enjoying watching
Oh,
some of those things. It's kind of my nightly cool down. So that's been fun. Then just get a chance to be a bit more physically active. One of the challenges, as you know well, in the professor life, is we spend most of our time sitting hunched at a screen, staring,
yes.
typing, thinking deep thoughts. So it's been nice
Deep.
just to hopefully deep thoughts, right? So it's been nice to kind of just every day get out, go for a walk or a run, try to just be more physically active and physically healthier, kind of attend to the body as well as the spirit and soul. So that's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
something I've been trying to really emphasize during this time. And
Mhm.
Lord willing, as they say, that'll continue once I go back to the classroom.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Yeah, 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 for sure. I was gonna say I think that we're jumping sort of ahead because one of my questions around where we are now is around like the combination of Lenten season, Black History Month, and the overlapping of Ash Wednesday with Valentine's Day, all the things that were going on. I was going to say one of the things that I've been trying to focus on for Lent is not necessarily dropping a habit or abstaining from something that I might pick back up later, but potentially establishing new disciplines or reestablishing these disciplines that'll just be continual. And it sounds like that's something you're like, okay, I've done this during the sabbatical, but also when I'm back in this rhythm, because I don't even want to say that's a grind, because then it
Right,
puts a negative the rhythm of back in the classroom and to still prioritize this part of health of
right,
moving and being. But you're right, we are at desks. We're at, now in this world, we're at laptops and computers instead of just typewriters and
right,
phones and moving. And there seems to be a lack of not a lack of respect, but because we're mobile, that
right,
there's a less of a boundary or distinction of when work time is. All right, so you
right,
always have access to your device, so you should be able to edit this and look at this on the go versus dedicated time of separation or
right.
compartmentalizing in a good way. So I'm
Yeah,
glad that
exactly.
you're doing well. You look fabulous. You look like you
Oh,
are
thank you,
resting
thank
and eating
you.
raisin bran and walking and doing all
Right,
the things and studying what you enjoy, studying, doing what you enjoy doing. So it's been great. So we're back, and what what do you want to talk to the people about today? Now that we're back, Dr. Kim.
right. Yeah, I mean, there's first of all, it's hard to believe this is already season 4. It
I
feels it feels like just yesterday that you and I were starting the conversation about JEL and trying to plan it out. This was what, December of 21. That
it
was when we
was.
first
Oh
had
my
that
goodness.
conversation, and then the first
Yes.
podcast and live launched in February of 2022. Which is why, again, we always launch the new season in February to kind of keep that rhythm. So it's hard to believe that kind of full cycle in terms of 4 years now to that.
Yeah.
Uh,
But this goes back to just so you all, I know, I think we talked about this, the genesis of this work. First of all is in Dr. Kemp, but as his student, what happened was Dr. Kemp was teaching a Hebrew class for my PhD program. Myself and several colleagues that you all probably know, great preachers across the nation: Freddie Haynes, Reginald Sharp, F. Bruce Williams, Jeffrey, down in Indianapolis, Moya Harris, Jennifer Carter, Lisa Goods, Eric Jackson, Larry Morris. I'm naming all of my colleagues so nobody says I
right,
left anybody
exactly.
out, and now I'm feeling like I
Shout out
left
to the
somebody out. So
cohort.
let me see. Shout out to J50. I hope I didn't miss anybody. All right, Larry, Moya. Okay, if I miss anybody, y'all, I love you. I apologize. So listen, we were doing Hebrew with Dr. Kemp, and we thoroughly enjoyed the fact that we weren't just learning the language, but Dr. Kemp always took some time to make sure there was a connection to preaching for us, right? So now those of us who were already afraid of learning or intimidated by learning the language, we gained a piece that connected to our everyday praxis that helped us. So we would come to class, and Dr. Kemp would leave a time for questions around maybe what we were preparing to preach. And beloved, trust me, we were great to get through the lesson, but those last 10 minutes, it was like, whose question are we going to prioritize?
Right.
Because you're preaching the closest, right? And so I remember just kind of taking the risk of like, I know he's my professor, but I just wonder if I want to ask him, like, Dr. Kent, have you ever thought about just offering your counsel or consult, for preachers? And I was like, and for a fee, like what
Right.
if you brought all this wisdom you had to a wider WIDER audience, for a different type of accessibility. And I remember Dr. Kemp kind of wondering what that looks like, what that means. And I
Right.
was like, I got somebody, I want to talk to you. And we rolled this out. And so I guess what I'm telling you all as you're watching and listening is like, for those who are mentors and older and professors, like what it means to also hear your students, respect
Right.
and hear and value our voices and contributions, and the fact that like we love and respect what you do enough to say, I think it's bigger. I think it's bigger than your classroom. I think it's bigger. And the millennial in me is like, and there's a digital platform for it. So
Exactly.
here we are. So like that's the part of the genesis of the story, as you all know, because we're sanctified. We believe that this was woven
God's
together in his
handiwork.
mother's womb as God put them together, right? So that
Right.
also is part of it. But just know how much of your vision and your work is also collaborative and collective. That the work that you're trying to do requires other people seeing something and encouraging. So I'm grateful that Dr. Kemp listened to this doctoral student saying, and if you don't want to do it for everybody else, can I hire you as a consultant? I was like,
Right.
if Dr. Kim had said no, I'd have been like, fine. My next question is, and so Just Enough Light Institute and Master Class Moments and the different Bible study series. I mean, it's been 3 years, but 4 seasons,
Right.
several other um, uh, special editions that have occurred. And so during the sabbatical, you've offered some special editions too, haven't you? And in person, I'm jealous. In person too, haven't
Right.
you?
Yeah, exactly. So
Oh,
one of the things that we'll do a little bit during this season is those who weren't able to be there in person get a chance to glimpse some of the work I did with an organization called the Candler Foundry. You can find
nice.
more information about them at candlerfoundry.emory.edu. But they do a series of lectures of kind of bringing Candler faculty into the community and into churches to help bridge that gap. So very much what JEL Institute tries to do of Unite Community Church Academy, Candler Foundry has a similar vision. So I had opportunity to do a series of workshops at a church here in the Atlanta area, focusing on kind of these questions of the Bible and race. I've also had a chance to do a couple lectures at churches here as well, um, dealing with questions of Ezekiel, sort of the raisin brand prophet, and particularly his kind of work on prophetic imagination and what does it mean to understand God's activity in the midst of national calamity. Then I had a chance to preach at a couple of churches and recently around MLK Day. So obviously I have to go pull MLK Day and Hebrew Bible together to do that.
Oh, Dr. Kemp. The people they don't always get the preacher in you. So we got to talk a little bit more about this preaching piece
All right.
for the MLK weekend. We'll revisit that because the people got they get the scholar, they get the recovering attorney, they get the musician, right? Of course, woven together with Hebrew Bible, but they don't always get this
Right.
preacher. So we got to go back to this MLK preaching moment and that wedding of the Bible. I will admit I wedded MLK sermons with texts around Gideon.
Mhm.
And so we're gonna wanna hear what you did so that we can steal it for next year.
Right. I think it's actually did it at an Episcopal church here. So you can actually go to YouTube and see it. It was kind of a very
Listen,
different experience than my Baptist tradition, right? Where
w-
the sermon you get maybe, 30, 40 minutes. In the Episcopal world had about 12 to 13. So,
and
that
that's
was,
generous. That is generous as a person who teaches at an Episcopal seminary and oftentimes preaches at Episcopal churches in the Austin area. 15 minutes is a generous time for the sermon. And so it's good to know that the Episcopal Church is being mindful of the ecumenical relationships and moments. Though it oftentimes still feels like tokenism for Martin Luther King Day. So I'm glad you were down there preaching. Yeah. So you didn't get no organ behind you then.
no, no, but they did have the church had the jazz band that provided music throughout the service. So they did a lot
I,
of kind of
I
traditional
I
sort
know
of
that
black
made
church.
your happy. I know that made your heart
Yeah,
happy. A little jazz. You were okay. All right.
absolutely.
See.
So that was a blessing for me to be in that congregation and to have that music, which is such a huge part of my life. So it
Yeah.
felt at home, which was nice.
Lovely. This is good news. All right. So I mean, where do we want to start? This is the fourth season.
Yeah. For me, anytime I look forward, I always take a moment to look back and kind of
Yeah.
reflect on how we got here. So as you talked a little bit about the journey, and kind of how it all got started, I'll give a bonus Hebrew nugget. There's a phrase or a word, oznecha. Oznecha is often a word that's associated with someone who is wise, but it comes from the root word that means ear. So part of wisdom in the Hebrew Bible tradition is all about listening. And so one of the things that often gets lost in life is I feel like we get so busy talking, we lose the ability to listen. And so one of the things that I hope in JEL as we continue to develop is really listening to what people are saying and responding to that in a healthy, helpful way as we go through it.
Mhm.
So listening to the J50 cohort kind of took sort of this latent visioning, really helped it come alive. And so
Yeah.
I'm always grateful for the wisdom wherever it is found. So I try to be that person that there's no limit to where God can deposit wisdom. So it's up to me to listen to God's voice in those things. So
Ooh, there's no limit. The people of God, he's already preaching, but we gonna keep moving. We gotta keep.
right.
Oh man. So yeah, we're looking back. So I should ask, do you have any favorite episodes?
um, I don't know if I have any one favorite episode, but there are a couple kind of themes that we've sort of touched on that kind of have resonated with me. And then, again, in listening to others, that others have said, "Hey, that's really good. We'd like to hear more about that." So one is obviously with my wife, aka Dr. G, and some of
Uh-huh.
the work we did around the Bible and mental health,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
kind of naming that as a real thing, and that you know the Bible, prayer, and the therapist all work together. And we talked
Yes.
about kind of God's hand versus God's glove, and
Woo!
so the gloves that God uses to always recognize again the glove has no power but for the hand that's in it. So how do we then avail ourselves again of all that God has to offer through pastoral counseling, through psychological counseling, through other kinds of means? And so that was important to merge those two and help people think about it theologically, as well as sort of practically in air quotes, because often practice and theology get separated in ways that I just think are problematic and kind of untrue and unnecessary. So that was one kind of thing, kind of the Bible, mental health. And second thing, you kind of mentioned it earlier, was thinking about the Christian liturgical year and the rhythms of our church rooted from the Hebrew Bible. Right. So what does
Yeah.
it mean to think of Lent from a Hebrew Bible perspective, of Good Friday, of Easter Sunday, of Pentecost? From that perspective, then we just came out of Advent and the Christmas season. So again, what
Mm,
does it mean to ground all of those kinds of liturgical rhythms in the foundation of the Hebrew Bible? So obviously, we'll do much more of that, but I felt we gave some nice little glimpses into that and the ways in which you can really mine those texts for that wisdom and that power in our teaching and in our preaching.
right, right.
And then the third kind of theme, which will be sort of a focus for this upcoming season, is really looking at the intersection of the Bible and race and politics and life in America. That
Mm,
that to me, it's I often tell with students in like an intro courses, if you're not biblically literate, you miss so many references and you miss how the Bible's really shaping a lot of what we do. Whether it's
Mm.
like watching a football game and you'll hear an announcer make a claim, the right guard pulled and blew a hole open like the Red Sea parted. And you'll hear that in the middle of a football game.
Yeah.
So obviously, all the political debates, whether it's Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Green Party, what have you, all of them season their language with the words of Scripture. So being more attuned to that, I think, allows you to be a more effective citizen. So getting a
Mm.
chance to explore that in more depth.
Yeah. And I yes, for sure. And I think one of the other pieces that we did do, and I'm sure we will do further, is this component of like the African American liturgical lectionary
Yeah,
and its connection to Hebrew Bible, particularly around this race development relation conversation. I think that's going to be very, very interesting. Just what it in light of, like you said, how people have either developed or constructed race based off of their biblical interpretation or understanding, and then what that has looked like for Black Christians in the United States connecting to their African. So how we like you mentioned you preach MLK. MLK is a part of that African American liturgical
absolutely.
lectionary, from Watch Night and MLK and Black History Month. And oh yeah, we acknowledge Lent, but then we move into,
Yeah.
pastoral anniversary and Mother's Day and Father's Day, things like that. So I think that was it's going to be rich. And I had never heard this connection of being more a biblical literate person helping us be a better citizen, which is going to be a powerful component to unpack. Were there any challenging episodes or themes that you thought maybe after they were produced or recorded, like, ooh, I wonder if
Mm.
there'll be any backlash, or I wonder if that was too much for right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we did anything like intensely controversial,
Hmm.
but the two things that kind of came to mind, number one is we did several episodes, and we will do more kind of on the Bible and women. And sometimes those conversations, depending upon the audience, they can go sideways very quickly. And
Yeah.
so oftentimes, I had a conversation recently that it's important to be textual before we're theological. And
Ooh.
the argument I make, I'm saying one needs to be textual before we're theological, is not that the theology we have inherited, we should throw it out, but we should recognize how it's coloring how we read the text and ask, is that what the text itself is actually saying? And so sometimes, particularly around those questions of gender, and some degree with race as well, but particularly with gender, you run into those kinds of things. And again, we won't revisit the controversy of Dr. Stewart recently, but we see these kinds of moments living on a daily basis. So some of our conversations
Absolutely.
around that, was interesting to see how people would receive that. Uh,
Okay. And
then,
you said there was a second piece? Oh God, I'm nervous now because that one was a little. You're right. I was like, you're right. There were some moments when you were like, that's just what the Bible, that's what that text is saying, and we were like,
right.
okay,
And then the second one is probably more a theme than it is kind of a particular episode, but it's looking at questions of how honest with the text are we willing to be in the shaping of our theology. And we've danced around some of the issues, and we'll dive more deeply into them because we want to kind of build sort of a safe space, a safe community. Um,
right,
but there are things that, again, as we study the Hebrew Bible in particular, there are things in it that you have to read twice or maybe 10 times because they're prickly. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
and I share with students kind of in my 20s, I spent time trying to figure out how can I have a Bible that will not cut? How can I have a Bible that's not dangerous? Um, in my 30s and now as I in my 40s, realizing the Bible is sharp. It's a knife, or to use the Hebrews passage, excuse me, it's that two-edged sword that separates between bone and marrow, spirit and soul. So the
Mm,
question now becomes, since the Bible is sharp, how do we create interpreters that don't weaponize it? Right? So the image I often used is a knife can be a surgeon's scalpel or an axe murderer's tool. So how do
Mm,
we help people be surgeons and not axe murderers?
mm,
Um, and so that kind of was a process for me of accepting, no, the Bible is just going to be sharp. But how then can we use those sharp edges in what I think are godly ways? And not
yeah,
just kind of individual reform, but structures of how we interpret, structures of
yeah.
literature we consult to try to aid in that process.
Yeah, and that's a gentle, intentional work to do, right? Because we know, as you shared, everything is radically contextual, and so
Yeah,
in learning the information, when and how anyone takes this content that you share on the podcast or in your lectures, how they use it in their context, obviously will vary from place to place, and all you can really do is highlight the integral components or integris. Both of those words work
right, exactly.
for how this moves. Um, with that in mind, then, were there any particular parts that you were like, these are good accomplishments or good highlights that you walked away saying that affirmed for you, like, I'm on the right path. I'm glad we're doing this. This is helping people. So any key accomplishments or highlights for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's the feedback, right? Hearing
Okay.
from people either I run into at Candler or occasionally at different churches, or sometimes people will send messages on Instagram, what have you, about, Doc, that really blessed me, or that was a word I really needed to hear. And for me, that's the goal of JEL, right? To, as you put it earlier, to share some of the wisdom that God has given and is giving me, because there's a song that my father's group used to play, that talks about how can I pull blessings into hands already full.
Mm,
And so the idea of living a faithful life, as I've come to understand it, is I want to always have empty hands, which means everything God
mm.
has given me, I want to make sure I have given it to as many as are willing to receive it. So hearing people do that and having students come up to me and joke like, Dr. Kemp, we need to get you on something better than Raisin Bran. Like we need to upgrade you, Dr. Kemp.
Upgrade you. I'm
So I have a couple students who jokingly call me Bishop Raisin Brand now. So
That's it. That's it. That's
uh,
it. I love those students.
right.
Oh man, that's so powerful and helpful. So listen, fam, you all have heard this is our fourth season. This is Dr. Kim's fourth season, but our fourth season together.
We're
We have
collective.
we're collective. We have built, established, brought in a virtual community, an in-person community that's moving. I mean, we've been able to be blessed by the wisdom of Dr. Kemp, Dr. G. Kemp and Dr. J. Kemp. We've heard about Raisin Bran and Parfait. You know, all
Yes.
of the yogurt situation that Dr. G puts together. That's a whole nother conversation. You all we'll talk about it in another episode because we got to ask her, did she upgrade at all during this? Because she's not, is she on sabbatical as well?
No, she's not. She's not.
All right,
No,
but she's been saboting in ways with you, so we got
exactly.
to find out if she added a different flavor of the yogurt or the parfait or something. And so, what do we have to look forward to in season four?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So season 4 will focus on what's my new book project and some of the ideas that are developing in that. So you'll
Okay.
hear more about this, but the short version of the preview is that I'm writing a book called Blackness in 3D:
Mhm.
Biblical Race, American Law, and Contemporary Crises. Right. So
Whoa,
again,
say it
blackness
slower
in,
for the people.
yes,
Blackness in 3D.
yes, colon. That's the
Uh
rule, right?
huh.
You have to have catchy colon technical, right? That's the rule.
Must.
Right. So blackness in 3D, colon, biblical race, American law, and contemporary crises. Um,
Oof,
so the basic argument of the book that I'm writing is that blackness in America has come to mean three things: that we are allegedly dangerous, depraved, and deviant. So dangerous, depraved, and deviant. So that's what the three Ds represent. And
okay.
my argument is that that construction of blackness emerges from a long interpretive tradition regarding the book of Genesis, in particular, three passages in the primeval history. So the primeval
Okay.
history is again Genesis chapters 1 through 11. So everything
Uh huh.
before the life of Abram. Um, and so what I'm looking at the book are how those texts have been used to create notions of blackness.
Mm.
And as James Baldwin, one of the forgotten or underappreciated prophets, I think, of the 20th,
Yes.
20th century, often talks about this idea of the images of blackness is rooted in certain images of whiteness, and that to
Mm,
change one requires changing the other. So part of what we'll be looking at in our time together and what I'm writing about in the book is how whiteness and blackness play off of each other. And one of the issues is how those kind of interactions or interplays find themselves into American legal systems. So this notion of blacks being dangerous, depraved, and deviant shaped how our laws were written and are written. And again,
wow.
one only look at all the debates regarding teaching history and so-called critical race theory, which as a lawyer, I can tell you, you do not teach critical race theory to an 8-year-old in third grade. But yeah, why let the facts mess up a good story? Um, so we have that. And then asking, in light of that trajectory, how do we understand 21st century America, which still is very much built on many of those ideas?
Yeah.
And so, as part of that conversation, we'll be joined every week by special guests, some academics, some pastors, some community leaders, to kind of get their thoughts on some of the material we've covered and how they see living in their lives and the work that they do. So, it's a chance again to
Yeah.
continue to broaden the community, deepen the conversation that the two of us will be having with these special guests.
Wow, 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 wow. Dr. Kemp, what you have shared about what is to come seems like a combination of both challenges and accomplishments to come. Those are some touchy, prickly, uncomfortable, yet affirming, needed, revelatory conversations that need to occur. And I'm appreciative of the work that you're doing during the sabbatical that is one life giving for you, bringing many of your matrices of identity and scholarships together to a conversation, but then also presenting information that is accessible for the people who don't have the time to go read all these books, but be able to kind of process what this looks like in the world we're living in the Bible we're reading, in the churches we're worshiping in. And so this is going to be great. It's going to be touchy. So I guess in essence, y'all have heard your trigger warning in this episode to know that as you listen for the rest of the season, you know, come prepared to hear maybe some difficult things. Come with an open mind and open heart, a prayerful spirit. And also know this is not a podcast looking to proselytize, convert, or change you. We're offering information for you to make informed decisions about your life. But what you can't say is you didn't know. So you will not be able to leave this podcast saying, well, I had no idea. Well, actually, you did have an idea or you have heard it. And so we're absolutely looking forward to that. You all will be hearing about the various guests that will be coming. I think we'll be able to offer some space where you might be able to present some questions beforehand so our guests will be able to answer some of those questions. We're looking forward to this publishing of this book because that'll be a whole nother season, whole
Exactly.
nother rolling out of conversation and book tours. And you never know, we might be in a city near you once this book is
Absolutely.
published. Because by
Exactly.
that time, this doctoral student will also be done with her PhD. Okay, praise the Lord,
Exactly.
amen.
We'll have a big
Um,
celebration for your graduation, my second book.
yes,
So
yeah,
if
yeah,
you
we're
come
gonna
in
do
here and
it.
just shout for like 10 minutes, y'all understand.
Shout,
Give us a
y'all will
grace.
understand. And we will have the Hoops Triggers app so that you all can
Yes.
hear the church music in the background. We're gonna be able to do that. We're doing that. So Dr. Kemp, this is rich to hear that that's what's coming forward. And yeah, man, it's exciting. It's almost I have a little bit of trepidation. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's because of me being formed in these United States of America, being quote unquote afraid to always speak about like the three things. Like, what is it? We're not supposed to talk about the dinner table. What is it? Like
Right.
politics,
Six. Right.
race,
Religion and
and
race.
religion. And I'm like,
Right.
you're bringing all of them together. And I'm like, well, we're here now. We signed up for it. We're gonna,
Right.
listen to it and be a part of it. So we're excited to hear that that's what is coming. Before we move forward, I want to give the people a little levity in some of this conversation. Dr. Kemp, what would be the hardest thing for you to give up during the Lenten season?
The hardest thing you've had to give up. Probably watching television.
Really? Okay. Okay.
Uh,
All right.
because for me, TV is a nice sort of decompression tool.
Okay.
And often when I'm working, I'll have TV on in the background because it kind of keeps my mind
Really?
from wandering. Yeah, I can't work in absolute silence.
Oh my gosh.
I need a little something in the background, so either TV or music. So
And I
can't
need
give up
silence.
music because that's so essential for like just the life of the church. But
Right.
television, that'd be the one thing that if I had to give it up for the period of Lent, that would be challenging.
All right. So, and then in light of that, you shared that you've gotten into some spy shows or movies in Netflix.
Yeah.
Any good ones you want to say you really got into, or recommend for some people who are spy movie folk? Because as far you say spy to me, I just think Go Go Gadget, the
Okay, yeah,
Inspector
Inspector
Gadget,
Gadget,
and
yeah.
I know that ain't it. I know that ain't it. So let's what spy movies are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah, so we'll do kind of a couple TV shows that were popular for a while. So I used to watch a show called Nikita, which was about a kind of a government agency that took people who were convicted of capital crimes and they faked their death to turn them into these super agents. So it's kind of it's an interesting uh, TV series from about a decade ago now, I guess it was.
Okay.
So TV shows like that. Um, there's a new TV show that's on, I think Prime, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, uh,
Yes.
with Childish Gambino, whose real name is Glover, and I can't remember his first name. Uh,
Daniel. Daniel.
Daniel, thank you. I was like, it's not Donald, but Daniel, yeah.
Or
Um, yeah.
maybe it is Donald.
Shout out to who we love you, bro. We just don't remember your name, but we know who you are.
It is Donald Glover.
Donald Glover. Okay. Um, so that been watching a couple episodes of that. I haven't obviously streamed the whole season yet. Kind of do it, and I am
Mhm.
disciplined. So I don't watch like 8 hours in a row. So it's kind of 1 or 2 hours to kind of unwind. So those have been the kinds of things I've been watching. A couple other things on Netflix called The Recruit, which is another
Okay.
kind of spy series of a guy who works for the CIA. So those are the kinds of things that I enjoy.
So in light of that, are you like a Law and Order person, or like a what is that, Miami Vice? Are you
Oh
or PI Magnum or something like? Do you watch any of those?
no, I've never gotten big into the kind of detective shows,
Okay.
um, and the legal shows because I was in law for so many years. I found many of them irritating because it's like, well, that's not what you
Uh,
would actually do. So I had to. It took
oh,
me a while to turn off the legal mind. I was like that. You can't ask that question. You can't do that.
oh, we
So
have to have a special episode. And Law and Order is one of my favorite series, the original all the way up to
okay,
original organized crime.
okay,
And so we need to have we'll have a special moment, you all, for me to hear what should not have Benson asked in this moment, or where she
right,
wasn't in the courtroom. So more of the attorney work. But you're yeah, this is that's so funny that you. That's really funny. You're like, you're not supposed to ask that. Meanwhile,
right.
I'm like, why didn't they ask it more? So yeah. Okay. And then, all right, any comedy, because in light of this, we want to know, what did you think about Cat Williams's episode on
Yeah, the Club Shay
on
Shay or whatever. Yeah,
yes, we got people, the people want to know.
yeah. So Cat Williams is one of those brothers. I would love to have a conversation with him and have my wife there.
Okay.
Um, because there's just so many interesting things happening in that guy's mind and spirit and heart. I would just love to just sit with him and see what's going on. So there are a number of people in my life that I've encountered. I'm like, so Gail, when are you free? Just hypothetically, if I were to invite someone to dinner or if we were to like take a flight. um,
Oh
so
man.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting to me about that was the effect of it. So like Club Shay Shay was known in some circles, but it just blew up exponentially.
Yes.
And so then
Yes. And
everyone's
now
had
at
to
this
come.
point,
Yeah.
right, at this point, I just want to know which preacher is going.
Yes.
Which preacher is going to Club Shay Shay,
Right.
because now at this point it is now viewed as the place of exposure.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because I saw he
Like,
had
yeah.
Kirk Franklin on.
Yes, but it
Uh,
wasn't, but I can't tell chronologically if Kirk was before or after um Cat.
yeah.
Kirk being on, I think, in combination with his own mini documentary, the release of his
Yeah.
album Father's Day, obviously, which will probably move into a tour moment, move into actual Father's Day. Um, I think I think this is Dominique's opinion. I think gospel artists have a different way of escape from being able to tell their truth
Yeah.
and not compromise, quote unquote, their ministry because they're doing music. Where I think if and not that I think Kirk is exposing anything super scandalous or
Right.
anything, where I think a preacher going up and showing and saying anything, I don't know if the doors of the church will be open again, if you're still,
Right.
depending on what church you're in, you still even have your appointment. So I personally am very yes, you are correct. I was not a Club Shay Shay person. but now it is pinned in all of
Yeah.
my browsers so that when one of us, one of you, hey, you black preachers, you show up on there and you my friend, you say my name, I'm coming for you. I just want to say that to you right now.
Right.
I
The
want to say that
warning.
just the warning.
I should
All right,
log
so we
off so I
got
can
the
represent you because if you confess a crime in advance, I can't represent you. So
right. Listen, we'll talk about that. That'll be offline, guys. All right, so
right.
Dr. Kip, we got Club Shay Shay. This is, I always do this to him, y'all. Y'all about to laugh. Do you know about Beyonce's new album drop that she's announced during the Super Bowl? Do you know about this?
Yeah, I did see the commercial for it.
Y'all know I always get Dr. Kent with Meg Thee Stallion, Nicki
Right.
Minaj, or Beyonce, and I was like, I gotta get him this time. All right, so
Right.
Beyonce does this commercial, right? At the end of the
Right.
commercial, she tells them drop the music, right? During the Super Bowl, two
Right.
new songs in Renaissance Act 2 are dropped, and it's told that, the new album will be dropped. Now, beloved, this is where I decide whether you are a believer or not, if you're saying March 29th or Good Friday. Okay,
Right.
it is
Right.
Good Friday, y'all. It is not just March 29th. She's dropping her music on Good Friday, and
Right.
I think that's really interesting. So, and it's a country album.
Yeah.
As a
That's
black
what
woman
surprised
coming,
me. Yeah.
did it? Okay, so it didn't necessarily surprise me because she's a Texan,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't assume that you wouldn't somewhere go through that. But maybe this is Dominique overthinking this. But this is also, y'all, when you are a scholar or a budding scholar. But I'm gonna call myself a scholar today
Yeah.
because I feel like I've been budding for some
Exactly. Right. Well,
time.
you're on the other
When you,
side of exams, so that for me makes you
yes,
officially a scholar.
when you are a scholar, at this point, you don't ever say overthinking. You just happen to think things about stuff. I feel like we have been going through various genres of music in her catalog. And I
Yeah.
just didn't think that country music would be absent from it. So the fact we've gone through dance and pop, I feel like we're just moving through it. And
Right.
then you're a musician in that I have been paying a little bit more attention to music and preaching lately,
Mhm.
which has nothing to do with my doctoral program right now. So I'm clearly, it's a rabbit hole I need to come out of. But paying
Yeah.
attention to the same chords being used in various genres of music,
Right.
and then the ways Black folk have either flattened particular keys or moments
Right.
for their Johnson catalog. So it'll be interesting. All right, so we got Dr. Kemp on. We already checked in with Razor Brand, y'all. We already we checked in with the sabbatical. We checked in with what did he think about the past 3 seasons. And we checked in on the book to come, which is major, and the work that's coming from there. We got him on Beyonce. We got him on Club Shay Shay, y'all. So
Right.
don't, if anything else you think we need to ask Dr. Kemp about, you ask us about this later. Now, Dr. Kemp, this is the one thing that some of your students have asked me to make sure I ask you.
Okay.
Were you ever a gamer?
Um, sort of. And
Okay.
so sort of in terms of like I didn't do a lot of the single person shooter games that a lot of people
Okay.
think about with gaming, but I was big into the sports like Madden and those kinds of
Ah,
things. So
all
in
right.
I'm not proud of this, but it was true. So in law school, I lived at a place we just called 400. So it was six brothers that all lived together. And so we would have lengthy and legendary battles playing Madden and a couple of the martial arts games because all of us had training in martial arts as well. So we would do that for obscene hours and have tournaments. And so there were more than one night where 3 a.m. would come and I would have to bow out to do homework that I hadn't finished for class that started at 9. Uh, so I did have those moments, said in particularly in law school.
Okay, well, for the students who I will not name, the question has been asked, and now you know, and now you can
Yeah,
appropriately harass your professor about his gaming.
yeah, exactly.
With that in mind, Dr. Kemp, what do you want to share with us about Hebrew Hotline? Because Just Enough Light has various facets of the ministry that it's offering. So Hebrew Hotline, which is, listen, I love everything you do, but Hebrew Hotline is my absolute favorite aspect of Just Enough Light Institute. So
Yeah,
talk to us about, is Hebrew Hotline still functioning and moving and working while you're on sabbatical and while you're writing this book?
yeah, absolutely. The Hebrew Hotline stays open. So again, to me, the work for the church it never stops, and not in a negative way, but in a positive way. That there are always lives that God wants to transform, and Hebrew Hotline is a tool to help preachers, pastors, teachers of the Bible do that. So we're excited to have that up and running. So it's still there. I know some folk have been hesitant to say, "Hey, Dr. Kemp, are you still available?" So yes, I'm still available. So my leave doesn't include the leave from JEL. So it's actually a good time to kind of get into those habits, and particularly we're in the Lenten season, and I think Dominique, you've used the phrase, this is the Super Bowl of preaching for the next 60 days or so from Lent to Pentecost.
Oh my.
So I know there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and part of what I try to do in the Hebrew Hotline through JL is lighten some of that load. That rather than you reading 10 commentaries and flipping through all these different dictionaries, I've lived with those things for the last 15 or so years, so I can help streamline your work so that you can give an effective word for the people. So Hebrew Hotline is still open. You can sign up for it if you go to our website, jel.institute. You'll scroll down and you'll see the Hebrew Hotline prep, and just go on that, schedule your appointment. You'll get a calendar link from me setting up a time and a little form to fill out to help me prep. So again, as for those who haven't taken advantage of it, what I do for each Hebrew Hotline is if you call and say, or send me email and say, hey, Dr. Kemp, I'm interested in preaching on, Genesis 12 for Good Friday as part of my 7 last words. So then it's like, okay, then I'll go prepare a translation of that for you and highlight some things based upon the theme that you're interested in. Then we have usually a 40-minute, sometimes up to an hour conversation. We'll just kind of walk through the text and some secondary literature that I think might be helpful to give you kind of that raw material for the sermon. So that's still up and running. Students are doing Bible studies as well. I think I had a chance to do one with you recently for your denominational meetings. So
Yes.
those kinds of things have come up. So I'm happy to, again, be a resource for the church as we try to do better.
Yes, yes. I just want to go ahead and put a plug in. Y'all already know I'm biased, but my godfather used to always say, you can be biased doesn't mean that you are wrong or incorrect. So I am an absolute, not just a fan, but a committed member of the Hebrew Hotline community. Not just as a preacher for myself, but also at times when teaching and lecturing. And then as well with my denominational work that I'm doing at times. And so Dr. Kent has come in and done workshops for my denomination. I am a Methodist. I am AME Zion, everybody. Let me go. I sometimes remember I have to
Right. Let the people
clarify.
know.
I am a member, I'm an ordained elder in the AME Zion Church, beloved, but I am an honorary member of the AME Church. But listen, Dr. Kemp has come in and done workshops with groups of laity and clergy around what spiritual gifts is in the church and how we parallel that to the various ministries that we offer in the church and ways people can serve in the church. So Dr. Kemp has done workshops with groups of persons like that as we have prepared denominational white papers as we move to legislation for the General Conference. So you all who are Methodists are hearing, before we got to the table of voting on legislation and resolutions, that the work and research was done on how we compare and contrast and dig into scriptural texts, looking at then our discipline and doctrine, and then how we have that in our lived out experience for legislation and voting, right? Because it matters. Now, as preacher, as Dominique is preacher, I certainly identify myself as a womanist homiletician, so a womanist preacher, which for me encompasses ethics and Bible interpretation and theology. And so while I feel like I might have a womanist lens at times, I'm not always correct when it comes to what did this Hebrew word mean. And so y'all know my preaching schedule. Dr. Kemp is on a weekly, a weekly retainer. He's on a weekly retainer because this is what we're preaching. But it also means for preacher preparation, right? To plan out what am I preaching this month or this quarter? Where could I use some assistance and some help? And then here are my questions around this text. In light of that, I also want to say you meet with Dr. Kemp and you do a Hebrew hotline session, and at times you get so much rich information. I'm telling you, as a preacher, you don't preach at all. You take all of this information and you focus one sermon, but then it becomes series or components and conversations for later when you're revisiting some things. And so I mentioned earlier in our time today how I compare to contrast MLK to a Gideon text about Gideon that Dr. Kemp and I looked at. Most people talk about Gideon and getting rid of the 300, or Gideon, getting down to the 300 men for the war, or Gideon now at the time of war in the jars. Working with Dr. Kemp, we focusing on this one moment where Gideon has a moment to go into the enemy's camp and overhears someone interpreting a dream and realizes he has the victory and goes back and says, yes, let's do this. Now, listen, y'all, that's good preaching right there. The
Right.
fact that Gideon was afraid, needed all these affirmations, God, prove yourself. But in this moment, he hears someone else tell a dream, someone else interpret the dream, then he runs with the dream. That's all y'all need to know. I preach that in the Episcopal Church, but you need to know that that came from a conversation with Dr. Kemp, where as preacher, I was so focused on how did we get to the 300? Maybe that's what I'm looking at. And there was this moment of Dr. Kemp highlighting for me from a Hebrew Bible scholar, understanding the preacher in me, this might be really what you focusing on and looking at. And baby, it became preachment. And so if you hear it again, it's coming up again. Okay. Don't say that you ain't. I'm gonna preach it again and again because it's solid content. And so I certainly encourage those of you, and not just for the preacher, if you're a lay person, you just want to know more, do the session, learn it, read it. And in this Lenten season, make it a practice. Invest in your spiritual disciplines of reading the scripture to learn more and understand more. And so it's been rich being able to have these type of conversations with Dr. Kemp, to learn more. And so I'm plugging it. I'm telling you to do it. And yes, you hear me preach from the Hebrew Bible. If you see me standing in your pulpit, you can already probably assume that I have had a Hebrew hotline session before I stood in front of you.
Exactly. And it benefits all of us. And so that's the beauty
Yeah.
of what we try to do, right? So again, no, it's always a pleasure to do those.
Yes. Well, this is our first episode of season 4. Y'all, we gave you a lot. We gave you a heck of a lot. You've heard a lot. You heard a lot of things. And so whatever you do, make sure you're sharing this. Make sure you're putting it out there. Make sure you're tagging some people. Please make sure you drop some questions of what you think you might want to hear from Dr. Kemp and the special guest for this season around Bible, race, no, let's go back through the pillars. What are the 3Ds? Black, being black, 3D, and
Right. So the argument that
dangerous, dangerous,
exactly
depraved,
dangerous, depraved, and deviant. So,
deviant, and then the 3 after the colon.
right, exactly. Of biblical race, American law, and contemporary crises.
That's
So
it, y'all. You got questions about any of those, the 3Ds or the 3 areas after the colon? Please make sure you drop your questions in there. Of course, Dr. G will be around as well. So you got some questions also around the mental health crises and that component, which I believe is in the contemporary crises that's coming up in the book
absolutely.
content. Drop your questions. You'll see some space on our IG where we're saying drop your questions, and we're going to be listening and hearing and responding because that's what Dr. Kemp does. And so, Dr. Kemp, thank you for bringing me back for season 4.
It's my pleasure. I said JL will not be what it is without you. So I'm grateful for your continued graciousness of time and energy. So as we wind up again, thank you all for taking time out of your schedules to tune in, to listen to our conversation. Again, the next episode, you'll get a chance to watch on YouTube or stream with your podcast, which will be an introductory session. And we'll talk a little bit about that in an upcoming video. And then join us for episode 3 with our first special guest. And I can say this and announce this boldly: the most special guest we will ever have on the show will be our guest in episode 3, which is Dr. Gail Kemp, the woman I'm honored to call not only friend and wife, but co-conspirator in God's work. So she'll be with us for our next episode. As always, as Dominic mentioned, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at JEL Institute, or if you're not subscribed to our website at JEL.institute. So you can stay informed of what's going on this season and have access to Hebrew Hotline and some of the other little nuggets that we try to make available to those who are joining this family, this community. So thank you as always for your time. And as always, and we close every episode with this simple reminder: know that God always gives you just enough light for the step you're on. God bless, and see you next time on Masterclass Moments with Dr. Joel B. Kemp.